Hello again, Wanderer. I hope your visit was an interesting one. Greek women lived very restricted lives compared to men, but throughout it... Is there anything else you'd like to do? Very well. Let me see what I can find.
Welcome to Argos, traveler. This is Argos, one of the oldest cities in Greece. The Argives were an ingenious people famous for innovations in areas like military tactics. However, what they were most renowned for was their metallurgic artistry, especially with bronze. I hope you enjoy yourself. Look for me at the end of your visit.
Δεν βρουν έξω οι πυρέταροι.
Τι συνέβη μόλις? Dishonor
Τελείωσον. Νηδία.
The area that would become Argos was inhabited as early as the 3rd millennium BCE, but it was in the 7th century BCE that it officially... The area that would become Argos was inhabited as early as the 3rd millennium BCE, but it was in the 7th century BCE that it officially became a city-state. One of Argos's major pillars was its metallurgical industry. As far back as the 8th century BCE, the city was famed for making products like long dress pins and tripod cauldrons, as well as impeccable body armor. In addition to their technical excellence, the Argives were also creative, as seen in their masterful bronze sculpting, which became prominent in the city during the 6th and 5th century BCE. Became a city-state. One of Argos's major pillars was its metallurgical industry. As far back as the 8th century BCE, the city was famed for making products like long dress pins and tripod cauldrons, as well as impeccable body armor. In addition to their technical excellence, the Argives were also creative, as seen in their masterful bronze sculpting, which became prominent in the city during the 6th and 5th century BCE. Bronze is an alloy composed of 90% copper and 10% tin. Because of this, copper and tin needed to be smelted and combined to create the material needed for sculpting. After the bronze alloy was formed, it was melted in special furnaces. They required a tremendous amount of fuel and were usually supplied with charcoal made from specific types of wood. It's possible they were also coated with a protective lining of clay, which would have been sensible given the melting point of bronze is approximately 950 degrees Celsius. Once the bronze was melted and collected, the furnaces were dismantled and dumped. In the 8th century BCE, most small-scale statues were molded using a complicated and lengthy method called solid lost wax casting. From the 7th century BCE onwards, metalworkers adopted the more efficient hollow lost wax casting. At its core, this process involved using sculpting models from wax, making molds over these models, then filling the molds with bronze to produce the desired shapes. The process was advantageous because it saved on materials, produced lighter statues, and reduced the chance of possible defects. Once all the pieces of the sculpture were molded, they were welded together and subjected to the cold working process. This process involved repairing the sculpture's flaws by filling any holes and cracks with specifically measured bronze patches. Afterwards, the sculpture was scraped, chiseled, and polished until it was deemed satisfactory. Decorative details like hair, eyebrows, and mustaches were added with the use of a sharp tool. Eyes, which could be inset with ivory, glass, or silver, were attached to their sockets using a resinous kind of glue. Teeth and fingernails were inlaid with silver, and lips and nipples with copper. These small touches added color and contributed to the sculpture's lifelike appearance. Bronze sculptures have a long and varied history in Greece. During the geometric period of 900 to 700 BCE, the sculptures mainly depicted idealized heroes, charioteers, and horses, and most of them were dedicated to sanctuaries. The Orientalizing period followed in the 7th century BCE. During this time, Greeks began adopting sculpting techniques from the East, and the depicted statues expanded to include mythological creatures like griffins and sphinxes. The Archaic period saw statues that reflected a better understanding of human anatomy, which eventually culminated in the realistic and powerful human sculptures of the Hellenistic period. Argos was the home of Polykleitos, one of the most famous sculptors in ancient Greece. His works, like the Doryphorus and Diadomenos, as well as his treatise on sculpting called the Canon, had a massive impact on the art as a whole, particularly in regards to ideal body proportions. Sadly, the original versions of Polykleitos' sculptures have been lost, along with most bronze statues from antiquity. As time went on, many bronze statues were melted down to be recycled in things like weapons, ammunition, and even church bells. Because of this, marble copies from the Roman period are our best evidence of the masterpieces of Greek sculpture.
I see you have completed your tour. I trust you have a new appreciation for Greek sculptures after learning of the heart and soul that was poured into each step of their creation. Now, what else would you like to do? Then let us dive right in. Here is your first question. Which era of sculpting came first? Correct. The geometric period lasted from 900 to 700 BCE and mostly featured small-scale statues and statuettes of heroes and horses. On to the second question. Bronze was an alloy composed of which two metals? Yes. To get the bronze required for sculpting, metal workers first needed to smelt copper and tin. One last question for you. Which renowned sculptor was a native of Argos? Which renowned sculptor was a native of Argos? Yes, Polykleitos was based in Argos and had an enormous impact on the art of sculpting. You've done well, traveler. Your knowledge of metalwork is astounding. And so, your quest for knowledge continues. Follow me.
Welcome to Laconia, visitor. You're here to learn about Spartan society, yes? Then I won't stop you. Sparta had a unique hierarchy, especially compared to the rest of Greece. Everyone had their place, and you will soon learn what those places were. I will find you again once your visit has ended. Until then, visitor.
Spartan society was structured around austerity, self-sufficiency, and a hostility towards foreign elements. It was divided into three social classes: citizens, perioikoi, and helots. Citizens were called Spartans, or homoioi. They were free men and women with mostly equal rights and wealth, though their contributions to political life were extremely limited. The perioikoi lived in surrounding areas under Spartan control. They cultivated the land and were primarily merchants and craftsmen. They were also part of the army, and their lands were the first line of defense in the event of a hostile attack. Helots were Sparta's lowest class. They were people who had lost their freedom to the Spartans, and they served the city as slaves. Helots were considered property instead of people. As a result, they had no political or civil rights. Helots made up the majority of Sparta's population. According to Polydeuces, they lingered between slavery and freedom. Two elements made Helots differ from other slaves. They were allowed to form their own families, and they were publicly owned by the city of Sparta instead of private citizens. Because Helots were deemed public property, they could not be sold as merchandise. They mostly worked to cultivate the land, but also fought in wars alongside the Spartans. While they gave the fruits of their labor to Sparta, they also kept a fair part of it for themselves. This practice allowed some Helots to make enough money to buy their own freedom. Alternatively, if a Helot served the state well enough in military campaigns, they could also be granted civil rights. The founding of Sparta is dated around the 9th century BCE. Historical information about the city is limited, but it was known to extend into the region of Laconia. Over time, Sparta started encroaching on the territory of Messenia, eventually leading to war. Sparta gained more land in this conflict, which they divided between their citizens and the perioikoi. The aftermath of the Second Messenian War, from 640 to 620 BCE, then divided the population into three groups: the homoioi, the perioikoi, and the helots. The helots of Laconia mostly respected Sparta's rule and did not cause much trouble. However, helots from Messenia supposedly resisted the Spartans, although sources can only confirm one revolt for certain, which occurred in Messenia in 464 BCE.
Τι λαμβάνει η χώρα?
During the 5th century BCE, Helots were quite active in the army, especially during the Peloponnesian War. They served as hoplites on land and as rowers during naval battles. In both cases, they gave Sparta an important numerical advantage. For every Spartan on the battlefield, there were at least 7 Helots. Although many ancient sources say Spartans had a hostile relationship with Helots, they were much more likely to treat them better in times of war. For example, when 300 Helots and 120 elite Spartans were captured by Athens during the Battle of Sphacteria in 425 BCE, the Spartans promised the Helots their freedom if they served them well in combat. Similarly, around the same time, the Spartan general Brasidas fought a battle alongside 700 Helots. Impressed by their courage and loyalty, Brasidas later freed them all and allowed them to join the perioikoi. During the 5th century BCE, Perioikoi were another group of Sparta's population. They lived not in the city itself, but in its surrounding areas. The Perioikoi were never hostile against the Spartans. In fact, both groups together were known by the collective name Lacedaemonians. Perioikic cities had their own autonomy and sanctuaries, but they were always bound to Sparta. They were allowed to develop their own local laws and economies, but could never reach a level of prosperity that rivaled their parent state.
I see you've finished. I hope you have a better appreciation for Spartan society. Nothing we do is without reason, and every man, woman, and child has a role to play. What would you like to do? Is that so? Then let us begin. During which battle were Ilots promised their freedom? Yes, in the Battle of Stacteria, a group of elite Spartans promised to free their accompanying Ilots if they helped the Spartans during a siege. Next question. Which of the following is another name for Spartan citizens? Spartan citizens were also called Omi, which meant equals. One final question. Which Spartan general freed 700 Ilots? Correct. Brasidas freed 700 Ilots as a reward for their exemplary military service. You passed. I'm impressed. Very well. Follow me.
Hello, Wanderer. May I introduce you to the Keramikos, the kiln that warms all of Athens' pottery. The Keramikos was a special neighborhood in Athens, where potters created vases and containers that stood all over Greece. This tour will take you through the elaborate process needed to turn something as simple as muddy clay into ornate perfume vases and gilded wine cups. Come find me when you complete your visit, and we can talk more about what you've learned. Enjoy your visit. I will see you soon.
The Kerameikos was a large, sprawling area northwest of Athens' Acropolis. While part of it was used as a graveyard, it was also dedicated to the creation of pottery. The Kerameikos was so significant to the art form that its name lives on in the word ceramics. Perhaps drawn by the river, potters moved into the area and formed their own bustling community. It's believed that by the end of the 5th century BCE, hundreds of thousands of pottery vessels had been made in Athens, including everything from heavy, undecorated cooking pots to delicate and beautiful containers reserved for the most precious oils. Sadly, only around 1% of these works survive today, some only in small fragments. Raw clay from a river was hardly fit for a potter's wheel. Athenian potters used clay that was rich in iron, which created the distinctive orange-red coloring seen in Athenian pottery. But this high-quality clay needed to be handled carefully to avoid disasters in the kiln later on. The clay was first brought to settling beds, where it was mixed with water to wash out any organic debris like leaves. Once it was purified, workers kneaded the clay with their hands to push out air bubbles and create the texture necessary for a flawless finish. One of the goals of these early steps was to remove any impurities that could destroy a delicate design, or worse, render a vase unusable. Once the clay was cleaned, it was up to the potter to shape it into a vase by spinning it on a wheel or pressing it into a mold. Their choice depended on what shape they wanted for the vase, but they also considered the possible scope of its decoration. Potters did not work alone. A workshop might have had many people working together on different aspects of production. Potters collaborated with many different painters for decorating their creations. Some of these painters even became potters themselves. All in all, a single vase could be worked on by many different artists, with each one focusing on a different aspect of its design. After the pots were shaped and decorated, they were packed into kilns for the lengthy and delicate firing process. The process had 3 stages: oxidation, reduction, and reoxidation. The main purpose of the firing process was to carefully manage the clay's exposure to oxygen. The chemical reactions caused by firing gave the pots their distinctive orange-red coloring. This also turned the designs made from the clay decoration slips glossy and black. The most difficult part of the firing process was managing the fires themselves. It required an enormous amount of skill and experience to properly judge the exact temperatures needed, and even the smallest mistake could ruin several hours of work. Vases could be decorated in all sorts of ways. Before 530 BCE, Athenian vases were decorated using the black figure technique, where figures and designs were painted as dark silhouettes. At the end of the 6th century BCE, painters created a new technique called red figure, an inversion of the painting process that left the figures in red and the background in black. This gave the artist more freedom to better explore details like muscles and individual locks of hair. Designs were sketched onto the bare surface of the pot using a thin, sharp tool. Thin relief lines, which helped define subtle elements like facial features, were added using a brush made of a few stiff hairs. More elaborate vases were sometimes gilded, but these decorations were so delicate, they were most likely only added after the firing process.
You've returned! As you can see, pottery was an arduous and delicate process, but was exemplary of the skill and craftsmanship that dominated Greek art and culture. Now, is there something else you'd like to do? Then let's get right to it, starting with an easy question. What was responsible for the orange-red color of most Athenian vases? Correct! Athenian potters worked with clay that was rich with iron, and that iron created a distinctive orange-red coloring. On to the next question. What were the chambers for firing pottery called? Correct. Pottery was fired in kilns, and the firing process was extremely precise and delicate in nature. You're almost done. Just one more question. The firing process was made up of how many stages? The firing process was not made up of 5 stages. Keep trying. Correct. The 3 stages of the firing process were oxidation, reduction, and re-oxidation. You know your pottery. Well done, Wanderer. Then we must part ways, at least for now. Farewell, Wanderer.
θες του το εστί. Πού καλυθές του το εστί. Τι συνέβη μόλις. Πού καλυθές του το εστί.
Welcome to Athens, wanderer. More specifically, welcome to the musical hub of the city, the Odeon. The Odeon was where musicians came to share their songs with the public. The melodies played here caught the wind and drifted through the air, soothing the souls of Athenians across the city. Come find me when your visit is complete, and we will talk about the things you've learned. See you soon, wanderer.
Music played an important part in almost every aspect of ancient Greek life. Whether attending a public gathering, rubbing elbows at a dinner party, laying out offerings in a temple, or marching into battle, there was a song for everything. Aristotle even wrote that music increased the efficiency of laborers, and it was often played for rowers and field pickers to keep them working at a steady rhythm. Musical contests, or agones, were originally only held during religious festivals. Over time, they became cultural events in their own right, and attracted musicians and spectators from all over the Greek world. For example, the Athenian Panathenea festival featured competitions for instrument playing and poetry recitation. The Dionysia festival included contests between groups of male singers to see who could best perform a dithyramb, a merry hymn in honor of the god Dionysus. While these contests could be attended by all, women weren't allowed to compete in them. In the early days of the competitions, winners only received a crown and an ego boost for their talents. But from the Hellenistic period onward, the rewards were upgraded to cash prizes. These prizes were large enough for musicians to make a fortune, especially if they moved from festival to festival. The Odeon of Pericles was built sometime between the 440s and 430s BCE. The building was commissioned by Pericles for use in the Panathenaea festival. The Odeon was also a venue for poetry readings, political rallies, and philosophical performances. According to ancient sources, the original design of the Odeon was inspired by the tent of the Persian king Xerxes, a spoil of war the Athenians salvaged after their decisive victory at Salamis in 480 BCE. The building's roof was made of timber from captured Persian ships. In this sense, the Odeon was both a triumphant symbol of Athens and an insult to their Persian enemies. This structure was considered one of the grandest architectural accomplishments of ancient Athens. In ancient Greece, there was a type of music for almost any occasion. Complicated songs like hymns, paeans, and dithyrambs were meant for the ears of the gods, and as such were usually played during religious ceremonies and civic life. Meanwhile, a hymneus was a song performed at weddings, and a threnody accompanied funeral processions. For more merry occasions like symposia, scholia were the soundtrack of choice. However, drama was considered the epitome of artistic expression, since it combined songs with poetry, dance, acting, and costumes. Plays were thought to be the connection between mortals and gods, and the songs that accompanied them, especially those from the tragedies of Euripides, often became huge hits in the rest of Greece.
So proud of the born to be Spartans, they'll ride through the fire they face. They carry the weight of Leonida, the bravest they'll fight to the grave. The bravest they'll fight to the grave.
Hello again. I trust your visit was worthwhile, and that learning of music was a feast for your mind. I know it was for mine. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Fancy yourself an expert on music? Then let's put your knowledge to the test. Which of the following songs was played at weddings? Threnodies were funeral dirges. They were unlikely to be played at weddings, unless the musicians had a morbid sense of humor. Try another answer. A paean was a hymn to the gods. It was not sung at weddings. Keep trying. Correct. A hymeneos was performed at weddings to wish the couple a happy and prosperous union. Let's move on to the second question. The Odeon of Pericles was modeled after spoils of war from which Athenian enemy? Correct. Not only was the design based on the tent of the Persian king Xerxes, but the building's roof was made of wood from captured Persian ships. Only one question remains. According to Aristotle, music was especially important to which group of people? Well, yes, but I'm not looking for the obvious answer. Think back to the tour. You are correct. Aristotle believed music improved certain motor skills, so it was played for field pickers and rowers to increase their work output. You definitely have an ear for music, Wanderer. I applaud you. Farewell, Wanderer. I hope you enjoyed the sweet sounds of the Odeon.